For those who don't know me, my name's Jackie Neeshaw and I'm Chairman of Events for the Gaujo Guild. And I'm just going to briefly introduce you to the modular layout project and the concept behind the build. Why did we want a modular layout? We had a lot of members requesting a large layout for Guildex, which is our big 2-day convention. And they particularly wanted a large tail chasing, roundy layout, which, as you know, the number available is limited. Many clubs and individuals do not have room for them. And obviously the expense of getting such a big layout, which often includes hiring lorries and vans, to get them to a show causes a great deal of expense. The idea of modular layouts is not new. So the Guild put forward a proposal led by Charles, instigating that the Guild could provide the fiddle yard and end curves, and then various participants from clubs around the country or individuals could fill the scenic gap. So the aim on the purpose is to enable visitors to Guild shows to see full-length trains running round. But as you can see, the fiddle yards, all of the dotted sections would be supplied by the Guild. So clubs and individuals could either contribute 12-foot scenic sections, and 2 of those would be displayed together at the Guildex show, or a group or individual could provide a 24-foot section. And you'll hear from participants doing both concepts today. This is just another visual showing the 24-foot fiddle yard provided by the Guild, which is 6 4-foot boards. These are modular boards built from Grange and Hodder kits. And then the end curves, minimum 6-foot radius provided by the Guild, again built from Grange and Hodder kits. And then either 2 groups or 1 group filling the scenic section. So the end curves have been kindly built by St Neots Model Railway Club. It was a great opportunity for the club, who knew that they wanted to participate and do a scenic module, to actually have the end curves on site, allow people to get used to building modular kits, and also, as you can see on the right-hand side, the opportunity to teach some of our younger members. And that's Simon teaching Chris, one of our younger members, how to lay the track and do joins at the board joints. As far as the end curves are concerned, they've now been completed with track, tested, and they've now gone into storage. We've painted the boards just to prevent any water getting into them, moisture being picked up from storage units. And they've now gone into storage, waiting for the next phase of the project. Keighley Club, led by Charles Oldroyd, our chairman, have been building the fiddle yard boards. And again, you can see they're much wider than the transition and end boards. We did take the opportunity back in last June in 24 to make sure that a couple of the curve boards fitted well with the modular boards for the fiddle yard. And then the fiddle yard boards have been progressing. So you can see there, fiddle yard board meets the transition board, meets the end curve boards. And obviously track and points were going to be in much greater number on the fiddle yard boards. So they've been testing where they need to go. And sides have been put on the fiddle yard boards as well, because with so much O-gauge stock being on the fiddle yard boards, it's important that there's no risk of anything falling off the edges. We've been using adhesive underlay on all the boards, as you saw from the end curves, and that's been completed in terms of the fiddle yard boards. And the next step with the fiddle yard board is the track work, which obviously includes the points and the fact that fiddle yards will be split into 2, so that if there are 2 parties using the front scenics, they've got separate fiddle yards to go into, or it can be used by 1 team in totality. We showed all of the boards without track at Guildex 2024. This was the first time that they were taken out and actually put together. It was a very important and interesting exercise. We found that after 2 days standing in the showground building, they did start to absorb moisture from the air, and hence the reason that we've actually varnished them all and painted them all. And we learnt a bit about making sure that we could put them together and making sure the structure was safe enough for taking, 2 days of working layout. That's a big 2-day show. So the participants so far, St Neots Model Railway Club are building a 24-foot module. Keighley 7mm group will have two 24-foot modules. Coverdale, which you'll hear about today, is a layout that is being converted to fit into the modular layout, and they plan a new 24-foot scenic section to fit in the future. Risborough District Group are doing a 12-foot module. Stephen Fay, as an individual, is doing a 24-foot module, an existing layout which will be converted with different transition boards to make it fit. Stephen Shepherd is doing a 12-foot module as an individual contributor, and Andy Sparks and Bill Bishop have just joined the groups, and they envisage doing a 24-foot module. And we'll remind people how to actually consider participating at the end of the session. So at this stage, I'm going to hand over to Simon Folds, who is representing St Neots Model Railway Club, to talk about their 24-foot scenic section.
Thanks,
Simon.
Jackie. So St Neots 24-foot scenic section, I actually came into it and it was already underway. So I've only been a member of St Neots Model Railway Club for coming up to a year now. And the project was originally started by a member called Colin, who unfortunately is no longer with us. So we've taken the decision, upon the recommendation of one of our members, to name our layout Collinwood in his memory. If you'd like to, next slide. So going back to sort of the layout and the concept of the gauge O'Gill modular track plan, looking at the overall layout, at the back you've got the guild boards, which are the fiddle yard boards with the curves and transitions at each end, and then the red highlighted section is where St Neots are putting the 24-foot scenic section in, and we've opted to give ours a slight curve, as opposed to just coming in and straight across as a set of square boards. This has meant that we've had to also build a couple of extra transition boards specifically to connect our layout into the guild end curves. As Jackie's touched on, Keighley are building the fiddle yards, and track has been laid to the transition and curve boards. However, we still have the project element to wire them all up once the wiring diagram has been agreed. Next slide. So just going into a little bit more detail on the scenic section, the project started off as somewhere in Leicestershire. So it's a sort of country, sort of branch liney sort of kind of environment running through. On the board, we have the two main lines, which are the through lines coming near the front. And then we've opted to add a little bit of detail and sort of shunting ability at the back side of the sections. Starting from the left, we have a station and platform that will run through the scenic break from the fiddle yards. Excuse me. And we are then obviously having a signal box as you come out of the station, which we'll touch on a bit later. We have a goods shed and goods yard. And then as we progress along the curves, we cross a canal, which is going to have a lock running underneath it. The lock feeding through and round behind the board at the end to service the maltings. So it's the sort of transition from canal transportation of goods to the railway transportation of goods. So it shows a little bit of a crossover between the two. That in itself is actually going to require an extra section of board to be bolted onto the back of our transition boards to facilitate the barges being able to come through and turn in behind the maltings. And then we'll model some sort of davit crane type setup behind the maltings to sort of support the loading and unloading of goods. Obviously the railway has to pass over the canal, so we've got to build a couple of bridges which have got to take the four lines, as you see where the blue line is crossing through, to be able to cross over that canal and lock area. If we move on to the next slide. So work in progress. So track lane has commenced on our scenic section. It's taken quite a while to get to this point, having obviously spent a lot of time putting the guild boards together and getting the track laid on those. But the club are now starting to lay track in earnest. The top picture shows our very own Ian Allen starting work on the first of the points that need to be built on the section. There will be 9 points in total and a diamond crossing that need to be built. The scenic section, we're actually using permaway track, whereas the guild boards have got pico track laid to them. Excuse me. In the bottom picture, you can see the dropped board, which is where the lock actually passes underneath the track, and the maltings will sit on the right-hand side, just in the to the right-hand side where the boards finish in the corner of the picture. Excuse me, I've got a terrible frog in my throat this week. If I can have the next slide, please. So we spent a bit of time as a group sort of trying to take a bit of inspiration as to what buildings should be looking like, where are we going to, obviously with it being somewhere in Leicestershire, draw that inspiration from. And whilst doing several searches along the various Midland railway lines, and sort of venturing into LMS as well, we came across Shackerston station on the Battlefield line, and actually thought that this looked a very good example of a station to represent. Shackerston is also sitting alongside the Ashby de la Zouche Canal, so it actually ties in as a theme with us having the maltings at the other end and the canal running under the board as well. Has an integrated platform canopy within the station concept, and it's a nice example of elaborate but functional station architecture. I think next slide, please. So having a concept and a starting point, we then started looking through the various different kit options that are available, and we came across this particular kit from Elcut Creative that, as you can see, is sort of very similar in style. Obviously has a slightly different valance running along the front of the recessed section. So we're looking at obviously progressing with this particular scenario, putting the kit together, and then the team can then sort of learn the different activities of weathering, because a lot of us are fairly new to the whole concept, and myself included, of sort of the weathering and getting the layouts scenics right. So it's a nice big learning curve for everybody involved. The sort of key benefit of starting from a kit is that it'll actually be a bit quicker to get started and get underway and start getting some structure on the layout. And as I say, having spent a lot of time building the guild boards, the team are very keen to get into the actual scenic element. If we can move to the next slide. Just following on from the station, as we sort of touched on, is the goods shed. Again, we've opted to get a second kit also from Elcut Creative, mainly because of the proximity to the station. We want to make sure that the style and design align between the two buildings. And again, kit construction means that it'll be fairly quick to get started, and then the team can then obviously move on to practicing and developing the skills in weathering, adding any extra scenics that are required. It'll be a roll-through shed with a loading bay to the rear to support goods movements on and off the platform that's within the shed itself. Next slide. Moving on to the signal box. So we're actually planning to repurpose what is the signal box that was on the Neots previous O-gauge layout, Helmthwaite. Now, Helmthwaite was taken to the Market Deeping show and was unfortunately vandalised at that show, along with several other layouts. So from the sort of the ashes, so to speak, the Helmthwaite signal box was rescued, and so the plan is to repurpose it and give it a bit of a makeover to align it to the Collingwood layout and sort of design. But it's already a fairly good example of Midland Railway architecture, so it seems a nice fitting tribute to sort of keep that legacy of Helmthwaite moving through into the new Collingwood solution. Next slide. And as we touched on at the end, we have the maltings. So it's a nice, imposing building. We have looked around and decided that we're going to source this from a customized kit from JS Models. They're going to tweak the design and the scale for us slightly, so it fits what we were intending in terms of overall dimensions. I think it's almost just shy of 800 millimeters long once we've actually got it extended. To the rear of the building, as we touched on, there'll be an extra section of baseboard created to extend the canal and provide a basin for the barges coming out of the canal to be able to rotate and turn alongside a quay at the back. And as we sort of touched on, perhaps be a small davit crane to help get the cargo on and off the barges. Moving on to the next, this is the lock, which sits alongside the maltings. So this kit, as you can see, has already progressed to a certain level. As you can see, it runs under the track. We've got two very nice canal barges already for the solution. And as it exits out behind, so we're looking at it from the front of the layout here, as it exits out from behind, that's where it will then turn at the slightly elevated canal level and turn behind the maltings. Again, this was also from JS Models, and being in close proximity to the maltings, it makes sense to keep those two kits from the same supplier as well. Next slide, please. So moving on to the bridges, we've been having a bit of a search around at different styles of railway bridges. Midland, this is an example of a Midland railway bridge that just so happens to cross a canal. So again, this is something that we're sort of digging into and sort of trying to decide whether these should be scratch built or whether there is something out there that we can actually either procure and repurpose, or just is there a kit that follows this style in the scale that we need. And we see it as a perfect fit, basically because it is already of the right style for the railway that we're dealing with. Next slide, which I think is the last slide. So the next steps, so Ian's got his work cut out with more points. The team have got their work cut out with all the buildings and sorting out the signals. We've also got to do the scenery and extend the canal out and around the back, so there's a bit more woodwork involved there. And the plan is we're actually going to take this Neots section and plug it into the Guild modular layout at Guildex in Stafford, and actually the team will be there working on the layout as a sort of live working session demonstration on how these things actually get built and put together. Jackie.
Thank you very much, Simon. Ian, is there any particular questions already, or can I move on to Charles?
Nothing in the chat at the moment, Jackie.
Okay. I'd like to then introduce Charles Oldroyd, who is our chairman, who's going to talk to you about the Keighley Model Railway Club contribution. Charles, over to you.
Thank you. Okay, so Keighley Club has been around since 1974. We're quite a large club with something like 60 adult members, a wide variety of different gauges in groups building their own layouts. So as a club, we don't have a single layout that we all build at the same time. But the 7mm group is a very active group. We have existing layouts, and they've embraced the Guild project, which is very, very pleasing. Can you take the next slide, please, Jackie? So we have an existing layout called Coverdale. And Coverdale is a might have been layout. It takes one of the multiple proposals that existed in the mid 1800s to extend the Yorkshire Dales Railway north from Grassington, up Wharfdale, through an enormous tunnel into Coverdale, and it would have then joined the North Eastern Railway around Labourn or Richmond. Totally ridiculous project, really, and unsurprisingly, it completely failed to get the financial backing that it needed. However, had that have happened, there would have been a railway running through Coverdale, and our layout supposes that it might have happened. The layout is 20 feet long. The scenic gap, as has been mentioned, is 24 feet, but we can put a transition board at one end to make it fit the curve boards. The other end has been the track slightly skewed, and so that will join directly. This is very much an interim measure to get us into the project. What we're planning on doing is a brand new layout, again, full 24 feet, which will be based on a joint line that was constructed and in fact still exists in South Yorkshire. It was built by the Great Central Railway. And the idea was that it joined the coalfields around Doncaster across to Manchester. Everybody had running rights over it in pre-group days, except the Hull and Barnsley Railway. So there's an opportunity to run pretty much any stock. And the fact that it still exists as a freight line, and it only ever was a freight line, means that we can run any era of stock we like, including the latest diesels. That's obviously quite attractive to the group, many of whom own Helgen ready-to-run stock. We'll probably extend history a little bit and suppose that it did have a passenger service, and in fact it sort of did, but not very much of a passenger service. And it could have had race traffic to Doncaster. It could have had mining traffic to the mining villages, so the mines in the area. So we shall probably build on that a little bit. There were a couple of stations on the line. We have one or two pictures. I have to say it was not a much photographed line, but then that gives us a lot of artistic license. We can do pretty much what we like with it. But the buildings will have a great central flavour because they provided the infrastructure of the line. And that will follow on. So Coverdale will be available, if not required in 2025, certainly for 2026. And then the new layout, which doesn't have a name yet, it's very much at the concept stage, will follow on at some point thereafter. Okay, can we take the next slide, please? Right, well, this is a general shot of Coverdale, and in fact, the top floor of the mill that we occupy. We have 9,000 square feet, so we're pretty fortunate in that we've got lots of space. The downside is that it's in a Victorian mill with no insulation except the double glazing. So blown air gas heaters help, but it's a big space to heat in winter. Okay, so this is one end of Coverdale. You can see in the foreground there is a branch going off, and that goes into a fiddle yard, which is presumed to be a limestone quarry. And the main line curves off behind it into a tunnel, and that will be going into the transition board that will join the curbs being built by the St. Neots Group. You can see there is a mill in the foreground there, and the quarry branch goes down to that. It drops a level and goes down into that, and I think we've got another picture of that possibly on the next slide, or the next slide but one. If we can take that, please. There we go, look. Okay, so there you can see traditionally built stone building. That's built with foam board. So the sort of signs you don't see them so much now. I think health and safety have probably knocked it on the head. But when you went to supermarkets at one time, special offers would have been on foam boards hanging from the ceiling over the aisles. And it was a free resource, which has a lot going for it. So we used to raid supermarket skips and peel the cardboard off one side of the foam board. And that gave us a foam surface with a card backing. And the foam surface can be engraved and coloured with acrylics, and it gives a very, very realistic finish. It's got a texture to it that you simply don't get if you're using Slater's plasticard. And in fact, the Greyer building in the background there is faced with Slater's plasticard. And that's more of a limestone sort of finish than the building in the foreground. Okay, can we take the next slide, please? Picture of the station there, which is modelled actually on Grassington. It's the same sort of half-timbered architecture, and this assumes that the Midland Railway built its line through. The track is all hand-laid, and it's laid to Midland Railway standards based on the information in Midland style. So it's got correct chairs, it's got correct sleeper spacing, it's got correct track spacing. Everything's pretty much scratch built, except in that picture, except for the crane that you see in the foreground there, which is a Mike's Models Midland crane. although everything is really set up for pre-group running, the fact is that lines in the north of England that weren't main lines didn't really change very much with the passage of time. I mean, even if you look at the Settle Carlisle and the buildings on the Settle Carlisle, the stuff is still the original Midland Railway buildings and infrastructure. Water towers, signal boxes, all the original Midland Railway stuff. Say what you like about them, they're built to last. So we can pretty much run anything we want. I'm not sure about the very latest stuff because we've got semaphore signals, but certainly up to the BR transition period is absolutely no problem. And that gives us quite a lot of operating interest and opportunity. There's a bay platform there where you see the cattle wagon sitting that can take a Midland Railway rail car, which we have. There is a passing loop, so we can have a train pulled into the station whilst another train passes it in the opposite direction. And then you see the track in the foreground, which goes to a scratch-built Midland Railway goods sheds, which I built based on a plan that appeared in Midland Record. Okay, next slide, please. That's us finished, I think.
Yeah.
If anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Anything at the moment, Ian?
Nothing in the chat now.
Thank you. Okay, let's hand over to James Aitken, who, as I mentioned, is chairman of our technical committee, but also leading the project on behalf of Risborough District Model Railway Club. Over to you, James.
Thank you very much, Jackie. Yes, the Risborough District Model Railway Club decided that we'd like to participate in the modular layout. I'm pleased to see that two of our active members who are building this layout are with us in this Zoom session, John Hitwell and Rob Thompson, both of whom have made large contributions towards this layout. Next slide, please, Jackie. So we decided that we would build a 12-foot module. This is partly due to the fact that we were trying to keep everything within the size of a car. So 3 4-foot boards would fit nicely in the back of my S-Max, leaving enough space for stock. Obviously, we'd need to link in with another 12-foot scenic section. I notice in the summary at the beginning that there is another group doing exactly that. We plan to show the boards that we've got so far and progress so far at the summer show in Kempton Park as a work in progress. Next slide, please. As a club, we built a large roundy layout based on Oakhampton with a pretty accurate track plan, sorry. So we decided it might be an idea to do something different for this one and opted to base our layout on Meldon Quarry, which, as you know, is just down the line from Oakhampton and provides all of the Southern Railway ballast, or did when it was in operation. So we thought we'd do a little quarry scene. And as you can see from the sketch here, we have 2 scenic breaks at the end of the layout. We've got a bridge, an overbridge at one end, and at the other end, a bridge over a small stream with trees and bushes hiding the gap to the next layout. Buildings that we can have here, engine shed, that will be a copy of the one at Meldon Quarry. And then we're going to do some a ballast loader, which will sit over the track and feed ballast into the hopper wagons. And we may or may not do the crushers and screens as separate entities. It all depends partly on time and who's available to do it. Next slide, please. Here's the track plan as it is drawn out in Templot. So we've got the main line passing through, double track main line, which will connect to the other 12-foot module, and at one end to the curved boards that go to the fiddle yard. We decided that as a 12-foot module where you don't have control over the other line, that we would allow one main line just to pass straight through. So one main line has got point work on it, which allows us to have a run round and also an entry into sidings, which will be where the ballast loader will be, the crushers, the screens, and the loco shed. And we thought we might have a bit of old railway track that had been lifted exiting the board at one point. Next slide, please. This is progress so far. We've put 3 of the 4-foot modules from Grange and Hodder together. Covered that in cork, and our track is all laid. Everything is Pico except for the 3-way point at one end, which was used simply to save space and to allow the fiddle yard to be a little bit bigger. Standard points are Pico, but we've taken out the very horrible lump at the end where the tie bar is and replaced 4 of the sleepers there with new sleepers because they look so much better. Catch points in suitable places, as you can see in the picture on the right hand side. And we'll have sidings long enough for 3 bogie hoppers and a brake fan, and some small engines that will be used. And you can see we've, in the left hand picture, you can see the engine shed is complete. We have a signal box that's complete, and the scenic, the bridge has actually just been done this week. It's been assembled at least, and that'll be painted soon. As you can see, the land will fall from one end to the other. Next slide, please. A little bit more detail. You can see where the embankment slopes down from the bridge, and it disappears. It'll disappear gradually all the way down to the stream at the other end of the layout. Next slide. I think that's it, isn't it?
I think that's it for you, James. Thank you.
Okay, well, thanks very much. At least that's we've made a little bit of progress. You can see all the ballasting is done, and we'll be moving on with the scenic side soon.
It'd be lovely to see it at Kempton Park as well. It's really nice.
Yep. Might even have some grass by then.
Okay, so in terms of next steps, obviously Charles and his team are busy getting to the stage of track laying on the fiddle yard. We're having discussions with all participants and getting feedback on their proposed operating systems. And we're starting to explore wiring options that would work for all participants. So I'm going to hand over briefly to Ian Allen just to talk through some of the ideas about the wiring. Ian, over to you.
Thank you, Jackie. Good morning, everybody. And hello, Torsten, who's joining us from Germany. I had some discussions and some exchange of communications with Charles regarding what we were going to do in terms of wiring the modular boards, i.e. those that are just being used as a fiddle yard, and the curved boards and the transition boards rather than the scenic boards. And obviously with my background in broadcasting, I was keen to make sure that we were using connectors between the boards that would be robust and reliable. So I've basically specified Nutric 4-pole connectors and sockets. The idea being that with 4 poles you can do 2 poles for one track and 2 poles for the other track, and we will make up some U-links connectors which will join the boards together. So as you can see from this PowerPoint presentation, this particular slide, in CAD I quickly mocked up what you would see as the inside face of the boards, the vertical inside of the boards, the vertical face, and sent this over to Charles so that he could have a look at it as well. So each board would have 2 4-pole sockets, one at each end, and then the next board would have the same. And as you can see, there's a little U-Link connector there with 2 XLR connectors. And as I've mentioned, the idea of using Neots is it's a very reliable brand, a high quality brand, which means they're going to be robust, and we've got long-term reliability for them, because obviously if it's going to be something that's going to be going out regularly, not just to Guildex, but possibly also other shows, because we haven't actually got as far as discussing that yet. We need to make sure we've got interboard connectors that are reliable and aren't going to fail. Next slide, please, Jackie. So this is just another slide showing the connectors in close-up. So you can see on the left-hand side, there is a male plug, 4 poles, and on the right-hand side, a female socket, also 4 poles. One advantage of using these type of connectors as well is I think you might be able to just make out on the socket on the right-hand side, each pole is numbered. So in terms of actually wiring them up, it shouldn't be that much of an erroneous task to get it correct for each U-Link and for each board. But at the moment, we haven't yet specified which connection will go to which rail of the tracks. Okay, next slide, I think, Jackie. So what will happen is, to connect to a group's scenic board, of course, they will also need to have a 4-pole XLR. Depending upon what they have between their boards, that hasn't yet fully been discussed, but for completeness, each group involved will receive a copy of this DXF file. It's basically downloaded from Neots' own website, so they've got all the dimensions for inserting the 4-pole sockets into their boards. I think that's the last slide for the moment, isn't it, Jackie?
Yes,
Me.
it is.
So the other thing that we've actually haven't got round to fully discussing with every group yet is how they are connecting their own boards together and what they've looked at in terms of wiring specification. Because obviously if we've got 2 groups with 12-foot sections, we want to make sure that they can connect to each other electrically, which is why we're suggesting the 4-pole XLRs for their end boards to mate up with not only guild boards but also another group's 12-foot section. However, we also need to make sure that groups are having wiring installed that is to a specification that is going to cater for all eventualities and flexibility. So for example, if you've got a group that's wired theirs with a very thin wire that can only take a couple of amps, and the group next to them is wired for a more heavy duty cable for a higher current capability because they're running big Helgen diesels, there may be an issue in mismatch of wiring specification. And the last thing that we want as an organisation and as a group doing this project is for there to be an electrical problem. I believe that basically all the groups involved are going to be using DCC control systems, but that hasn't yet been fully verified by all teams. Neots are certainly wiring for DCC. James, is your group DCC as well?
Yes, it is. Yeah, DCC.
And Keighley, Charles? Unmute, please, sir.
Yeah.
You're DCC as well?
Well, some people have DCC locos, others don't. So potentially there'll be a mixture when it's being operated in the club, but not all of the groups, all the participating groups are building to DCC use.
So the wiring has to be able to cope with DC and DCC and different current capabilities. So in terms of specification, we were looking at over specifying the wiring. Certainly because we've got to look at future proofing. So even though most people might think that these connectors are 10 amp capable on each pin, so it might seem like an over specification, but it means we're future proofing, and we're also providing a little bit of protection in case of any shorts, and we know that the wiring isn't going to fail if there's any problems with shorts across any of the wiring terminals. So that's where we currently are with wiring. And as mentioned in a previous slide, at the moment, I don't think every group has decided what kind of control system they're going to be using, either whether it's going to be for DCC, whether it's Lens or NCE or Digitrax or AN other supplier. So that's something we've also got to make sure that we're allowing for future-proofing in the wiring capability. If NCE, for example, if you're using power boosters, you're looking at 5 amps for each power booster. There's I think is Digitrax 6 amps, James, on their power boosters. One of the other suppliers is 6 amps.
It says 4.
Right. So their power boosters are 4 on Digitrax.
I believe so.
Yeah. Okay. And there is one of the manufacturers that I've read the specification for. Lens is 5 amps. Thank you, John. But there is another manufacturer that is 6 amps. So we've got to allow for that flexibility in the wiring. Yeah. Thank you, Charles. 10 amps specified for Keighley. So Keighley is doing 10 amps. The guild boards are going to be 10 amp capable as well. Yeah. And I'm suggesting to St. Neots Group that we do the same thing. We maintain a 10 amp capability because it gives you flexibility and there's overhead in terms of current capacity. Okay. So thank you.
Thank you, Ian. A brief mention just to say thank you, because Grange and Hodder did discount the modular boards which we purchased for the fiddle yard and for the end curves, and they also agreed a discount code for any participants in the project who are building sections at club. Intensio kindly produced the modular templates which have been issued to all participants free of charge, and that's imperative to make sure that the tracks line up when you're actually moving from the modular boards built by the guild to the club scenic boards or the individual scenic boards. Pico kindly supplied at a discount the track for the fiddle yards and the end curves, and obviously it'll join on to more Pico track, or in our case we're using Permatrack at St. Neots, and it joins very nicely to that as well. Ellis Clark has offered a £50 voucher for participants to source something from them for their scenic sections, and L-Cup Creative providing a £100 voucher for participants to source something from L-Cup for their scenic section. It's not too late to participate. If you or your club or your O-Gauge group can fill the scenic gap, then the contact details for Charles, our chairman, is at the bottom. You can choose, as you've seen, to do the full 24-foot or a 12-foot module. It's ideal to stand alone, and so that you can take it out to exhibitions as a club or as an individual, but then join it up to the rest of the boards so that it becomes a continuous running exhibit. And certainly all participants will get at least one opportunity to exhibit at Guildex. And obviously those completing the 12 feet section will be partnered with another 12 feet section, and each with their own tracks to use. So I hope that's been helpful as a background and what's happening so far. You'll see the Risborough Group contribution as work in progress at Kempton Park, and the St. Neots contribution as work in progress at Guildex. Any questions? Anybody wishes to unmute and ask a question, then please do.
Hi, Jackie. It's John Hipwell. I have a question. At this stage, how many other clubs are building 12-foot modules?
There's only one other at the moment, I think, from what we've heard back, Charles. I showed a slide earlier of who's participating, and at the moment there's an individual building another 12-foot section.
Okay. The other thing I would say about Oakmont Quarry, the ballast that we've used is actually from Melton Quarry itself. We've managed to acquire it, so it's very appropriate to use on that particular layout. And the other thing is we are designing in-house the bridge and the buildings that will go on that layout, and we will print them off, we'll laser cut them ourselves.
Thank you very much.
Jackie, one question, if I may. If you're doing a 12-foot board, is it intended that you would run through onto the other 12-foot board, or are they effectively two dead-end boards and access to the fiddle yards from each direct, from their own particular direction where they join the club boards?
The idea is they would run through. Charles, do you want to elaborate on that?
Sure, sure. Effectively, if we have two groups participating in an exhibition, each with their own 12-foot module, then there will be through running around the complete layouts. So one group will look after the outer circuit, the other group will look after the inner circuit. So effectively, each group will be running across their own module, but also across the other group's module as well. That's why the fiddle yard is being split into two, electrically separated, and part of the specification for participants building scenic sections is that they are also electrically separated if it's a 12-foot section. That way, you could have one group with a 12-foot module running DCC and the other group running analog. If the group's building a full 24-foot section, it doesn't really matter, of course. They can have crossovers and everything because there is no other group to be considered. But any group building a 12-foot module will be partnered with another group, hopefully with a similarly themed, scenically and chronologically layout. And then through running can be achieved in both directions.
Do you
So you are going to
do you want to redisplay the track plan from our club, if you can get to that slide?
Yep, just bear with me a moment.
Just I can emphasize a little bit from that. Okay, following on from what Charles was saying about keeping things separate, this is what we've done. Because the double track, where it crosses the end, where it meets either the next 12-foot section or the fiddle yard, those tracks are sort of slap bang in the middle of that side. We've kept one track completely separate, so that's the other club's track. And you can imagine that if you had two of these side by side, both of us would then be operating on the inside of that track. So we can reverse ours, or they can reverse theirs, so that they get the plain piece of track, we get the track area with the points on. So we can, and we've designed ours very much from the point of view that we can operate from either side. Okay, thought I'd just help that sort of emphasizes what Charles was saying about keeping things separate.
Thank you, James.
So effectively, you're specifying on a 12-foot board the entry and exit position of the two running lines.
Correct, that's all we're specifying.
Absolutely, and if I can just say, that's what the Intensio template is about, making sure that the board ends all line up exactly, that the track's in the correct position for lining up with another module or the curved end boards.
And I think we will get more and more people who start to join the project as time goes on. Initially, I think there were some people who were a bit skeptical about, could this possibly work? I haven't got room for a 24-foot module. Some have, some haven't. Not sure how my 12-foot would join up with the other 12-foot. What about if I'm, 1980s and they're 1940s? Well, obviously, ideally, as Charles said, we'll try and make sure that if two 12-foot teams want to come together, we'll try and marry up similar eras wherever possible. But for the likes of Torsten, who's with us from Germany, if any of our overseas and European clubs want to participate, then the feasibility of getting 24-foot from the continent to us is limited. but bringing 12-foot module from overseas, particularly with Eurostar and the ferries, etc., becomes very practical and means our European members can contribute as well. So I'm hoping that as more and more people see this progress, they will start to join the project. Any other queries from anybody? Okay, we're just coming up to midday, so just a quick reminder for some people who are non-members, may not be familiar with the Guild. If you've enjoyed this Zoom session, then we do run an evening seminar once a month, 26th of each month at 2000 hours. It's timed so that our European and overseas colleagues can join us in the evening as well. So in February, we've got Nick Dunhill, who's scratch building a locomotive and is moving on to ash pans and pickups. And then you can see for yourselves a variety of topics which are covered by Zoom every month. It's free for members to join. And obviously, if you're a non-member, you can still come along, and it's only £3 for an evening of very enjoyable and very educational topics. We also, for those of you who are non-members, have a quarterly gazette, which you get, and a quarterly newsletter, and you get discount for all of our events. There's a massive Guild forum. We've got 5,000 members, many of overseas. So it's a huge network of expertise that can help you with any O-Gauge project. And for £30 or 33 for overseas members, it is a lot less than a lot of people are paying, and actually comes out about £1 a week. We're also just starting digital membership. So if you choose digital at £25, it means that you can view the quarterly gazette, news, Guild news, and all our AGM papers and things online rather than actually getting the paper copies. So there's a lot to enjoy from membership of the Guild. And if you've been inspired by today, then I hope that that's something you might consider if you're not already a member. Finally, as I've mentioned, the new quarterly membership has started, but you can also do a 1 month free trial, which is basically a 1 month free trial of digital membership. So if you visit the Gauge Guild website and click on what the Guild offers, what membership offers, then all the information is there. Please be reminded that the virtual show, the live sessions that you're joining today are all being recorded. They'll be available later in the next few days and certainly be available via the virtual show for the next month. Everything, the layout videos, the demonstration videos, all of these live sessions, which will move on to video, and all of the advertising from the traders is available for the whole month. And the entry point is always through the front page of the Gauge Guild website. So on those dark evenings, which we're forecast, please do make the most of all of the videos. And we've still got a huge YouTube channel, which has over 600 other videos for you to watch and learn from. So thank you very, very much to everybody for joining us. I hope the session has been useful and look forward to seeing you at future sessions. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks, Jackie, for hosting the session. Good job. Thank you.
Thank you.